Will, Vinyl Appreciation Society. This is kind of like a random segment. Maybe we'll do more of these. I don't know. Tentatively, we're calling it Random Album Appreciation Post. I'm just going to be talking about this record, which I really like, explaining to you why I'm talking about this record in particular right now, and just give you some reasons that I like it, and then I'll be out of your hair. This is Posthuman. The band is Harm's Way, and they are a metalcore, I guess you'd call them, band. They have influence from death metal, from power violence, from hardcore, from industrial, from all different types of music. And this is a really fantastic album. It came out in February 2018. And the reason I'm talking about it now, well, there are two reasons really. One is that kind of at the end of 2018, when all these lists started coming out of, like the best records of the year, there were bands that I think are kind of associated with Harm's Way that were on a lot of like more mainstream lists where you wouldn't expect to see bands like that. Vane is one of them. Vane is a band that kind of combines some electronic influence with some like pretty strong like 90s metal influence, and then also like more modern hardcore. But I hear like a lot of Refused, and like some people have mentioned Slipknot and other stuff like that in reference to this band. And then there's a band called Jesus Piece, who's like this really heavy, just like brutal, mosh-centric, that's the thing that you want to say, kind of metalcore band. The two of them got a fair amount of attention. Turnstile is a hardcore band that's kind of like broken out of the mainstream. They were, I think, on the cover of Spin. And then Code Orange was actually, who's toured with Harm's Way, and on paper has a very similar sound to them, although I don't think they really sound that much like each other when you listen to the records. They were, I think, nominated for a Grammy this year. So they were at the Grammys, and they're like, like a hardcore band from Pittsburgh, so that was pretty cool. And so the second reason I wanted to talk about this is I've been listening to this album a lot recently. And I kind of like discovering more about it as I listened to it, and I just feel like it maybe didn't get like it got from the publications that reviewed it and the websites and stuff. It got positive reviews. People who talk about it positively, but it didn't really blow up beyond the scene in which it already exists, which is kind of a shame to me because I think this record is really fantastic and is better than a lot of the other heavy music that's out there right now. And I think some of the lack of attention is maybe undeserved, or maybe stems from like silly kind of scene politics type stuff. Not scene politics, but like the way that people perceive heavy music and image and stuff like that. I'm not really going to talk about that. I'm just going to talk about the record. So I wanted to do like an easily organized thing, so I came up with 3 reasons why I really like this record. The first one is I think that the songs are really, really well structured. The riffs are really well put together. They flow really well from one to the other. And I say structured, when I hear the term songwriting, I think of this kind of like almost, if anyone here follows Rick Beato, that kind of concept of like, here's a B minor next to, a C major and this, whatever, it's like the Lydian, the whole, I understand a little bit about music theory. I've like taken lessons and stuff like that, but I'm not super advanced. But I kind of think of that when I think of like good songwriting. And I don't know if I'm qualified to say what is and isn't good songwriting from that perspective, but also I don't really think that metal bands that are not traditional metal, like obviously I think you could apply those ideas to Black Sabbath or technical death metal or kind of like Iron Maiden or stuff like that. But I think like post kind of metalcore and post bands that experiment a lot with song structure and things like that and aren't really using chords as much as they're just playing riffs. I don't know if those things really mesh. Maybe they do. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think of this more as just really well structured songs. And it's obvious that the band spent a lot of time putting together all the different riffs and then figuring out how those riffs become songs. And the songs kind of rise above the level of just being interesting riffs. Like there are some bands who I think write really good riffs, but they don't make particularly interesting songs, and these guys do both. And one of the things I find to be really interesting about these riffs is they're kind of sinuous in that you'll have a riff that repeats the same way twice, and then the third time is different, and maybe the fourth time is different, and then that finds a tail that winds back to the way it was played the first time. It's just like little things like that that make a big difference in how the songs are, as opposed to like, I think there are a lot of bands who are, from the hardcore scene and have incorporated elements of metal into their sound and industrial and stuff like that, who will play like a 2-chord, 3-chord, like dissonant breakdown and then have a fast part. And then it just sounds like it's kind of chaotic, like let's put this riff here and that, let's record it and whatever. And this, it sounds like the work of like musicians who are very carefully and deliberately trying to put together work that they think represents who they are as musicians, who they are as people, and what they're trying to accomplish as a band. And I really appreciate that about this album. There was obviously a lot of thought and process put into the riff writing and song structures and stuff like that. Second thing I really like about this record, which kind of ties into what I just talked about, is the sound of it. It's really, really well put together. I don't know a lot about the differences between engineering, mixing, mastering, and who's responsible for what sounding like what, but so Will Putney produced this, and he engineered it, and he may have, and he mixed and mastered it. So you know what? We can put it all on him. There you go. Voila. That solves my problem. So there's songs in here that have samples, and that plays into and programming, I think, more to the point. I think it's programming more than samples. And that plays into the kind of industrial influences on this band, which are, Godflesh, Nine Inch Nails is a band that I've seen members of this band mention in interviews and stuff like that. And so they have this sense of these kind of repeating programmed parts, like noises in the background of the songs, these dissonant kind of industrial elements. And the way that they're incorporated into the kind of like muscular heaviness of the guitars and the organic instruments is really well done, and it sounds really good, and it's almost so well done that you could miss it at first. And as I listen to this album more, I hear more and more, and I hear these little flourishes and intricacies that cause me to realize how well put together the songs are. It also sounds really, really good. You can tell that this record is people in rooms playing instruments. It doesn't sound like one of those albums that is so processed through computers that it almost sounds like someone just typed in the notes and hit play and it programmed it for them. Like, you really hear the idiosyncrasies of human beings playing instruments, which I think is really cool. And so it's just a really good record to listen to, especially on really good headphones. I have like kind of crappy speakers in my car. It doesn't sound great on my car, but I have nice headphones, and listening to this on nice headphones, you can really hear all of that coming through. And from a band, I think that comes from a scene that's more traditionally thought of as like, you show up, you play really loudly, and you're done. To put that amount of effort. And obviously, we look at bands like Converge, we know that that's not what, metalcore bands, hardcore bands, whatever you want to call them, are doing now. But just the amount of that, like I said, ties into my first point, the amount of thought that went into creating this record. And then the last thing I'll mention, number 3, the lyrics. Lyrics and hardcore metalcore is kind of like, it's murky waters to wade into, right? Because you have some amazing, I'm a huge fan of Bane. I'm a huge fan of Modern Life is War. I love Sick of It All. They all write fantastic lyrics, right? And they're interesting, and they're original, and they're topically diverse. I saw this really interesting interview recently with Jamie Josta, who is the frontman for Hatebreed. And honestly, Harm's Way in some aspects kind of reminds me of Hatebreed, because this is kind of a tangent, but one of the criticisms I've seen of Harm's Way on YouTube comments, I like obsessively read YouTube comments I disagree with, and then I argue with the people in my head, is that they can't play their instruments, which is bullshit to me, because they play, I've been in bands before, and I've seen a lot of bands in my day, and the Harm's Way is really tight as a band, and they're just like, it's like a wrecking ball when they lock into these grooves and these riffs. And, what defines whether or not they can play their instruments? Like, they are accomplishing what they want to accomplish as a band, as musicians. And so, yeah, guess what? They can play their instruments because that's what they're trying to do. I think people don't understand intention when it comes to art, right? And there's this sense of like, well, if you can't play like, Yngwie Malmsteen, then you can't play the guitar. And it's like, well, not everybody uses the guitar the same way. And if you are accomplishing your means with the guitar, then you can play guitar well, because that's what you're trying to do with it. So I would vehemently disagree with that. But they kind of remind me of Hatebreed in the sense that rather than focusing on technical virtuosity or like, various other complexities of the process of playing an instrument, they focus on the visceral impact of the music. And Hatebreed as well, I would use the term wrecking ball to describe, because when Hatebreed locks into those grooves, when they do those tempo changes, it really is like a wrecking ball coming through. So the interview with Jamie Josta that I saw he was asked about death metal and hardcore. And he said that he finds himself listening to a lot more death metal because he finds the lyrics topically a lot more diverse and interesting, whereas he finds a lot of hardcore music to be someone yelling about something they're angry about. And it's usually like a friend or an ex-friend who has betrayed them, or someone who broke up with them, or something like this. And the older I get, the more I find that to be true. Like, I don't really need to listen to someone being angry at their friends on a record. Harm's Way is really interesting because they have philosophically interesting topics. So this album is called Posthuman, and if you read interviews with, especially the drummer, his name is Chris, I think, and the singer, who I think his name is James. Did I get that right? It's right here in front of me. Like, why don't I just look? Chris Mills and James. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because I'll get it wrong. And they talk about the philosophy, and posthumanism is this kind of complex thing. And if you look it up on Wikipedia, which we can include a link to in the description of this video, you'll see that it's kind of a multidiscipline thing. And it touches upon philosophy, social theory, like speculative fiction even, and all this stuff. But posthumanism and transhumanism are the topics of this record. And the lyrics are, not only are they addressing like topically very interesting things, they're kind of oblique, which I think is really interesting, especially for a band that's coming from this scene, is you don't get that many bands in heavy music whose lyrics are a little bit esoteric. I can think of the Deftones, who are probably my favorite. If you would call the Deftones metal, then the Deftones are probably my favorite metal band. Poison the Well, I think, is heavily influenced by Deftones. They have kind of oblique lyrics. But a lot of metal bands are very literal and precise about what they're saying. And it's not that there isn't a message in here. Like, if you think about transhumanism, posthumanism, and the state of the world right now, you can read these lyrics and they make sense to you. But there is this kind of oblique free association, almost like impressionistic sense with the lyrics here. So there you go. So now I can show this record off to you real quick. This was put out by Metal Blade Records, and like I said, it came out February 2018. We'll put a link where you can buy it. I really love this album. There's a bunch of different variants on different labels. So they were originally on Closed Casket Records. Well, maybe not originally, but they put out their first their first or second full-length record on Closed Casket. It's ironic that I'm drinking beer and talking about a straight edge band. And if the straight edge band is watching and is offended, I apologize. So, Closed Casket Activities, Death Wish, which are both labels they used to be on, got their own special variants of this record. And then Metal Blade put out variants in the US and in Europe and so on and so forth. There's a birthday cake one that I've seen on Instagram that's really, really cool. But this is the kind of like blue-purple marble, I think is kind of the color of that record. And I think there's still a few of these left. Through Metal Blade Records. So like I said, we'll include a link to their web store where you can buy that. So that is Posthuman. The band is called Harm's Way. Awesome band. Awesome record. Go listen to it. Give them some attention. Give them some love. Find them on Instagram. Find them on Facebook. Go be their fan. Thank you for watching. I am Will. Please subscribe, like, comment, all that jazz, and we will see you next time.